there were plenty of reasons for the country's wariness. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq had been grinding, brutal campaigns with few obvious victories against enemies whose preferred weapons were suicide vests and roadside bombs that blew up GIs in their Humvees by remote control. The early euphoria over the so called Arab Spring revolutions had long since given way to despair as Americans witnessed the rise of a Muslim Brotherhood government in Egypt and the ascendance in liberated Libya of Islamist militias who murdered a US ambassador and burned and sacked the consulate at Benghazi. The world had not yet seen the Syrian conflict's most calamitous effects, the millions of refugees, and the rise of a terrorist caliphate in the heart of the Middle East. But in the summer of 2013, most Americans had seen enough. Once, in the previous decade, they had believed a US president who sold them on the idea of a war to prevent the use of weapons of mass destruction. However noble the cause, this time, Americans weren't buying it. Obama tried once more to sway public opinion. In the days following McConnell's remarks, he had released the classified report showing why US intelligence officials believed Assad was behind the gassing of Syrian civilians. Now he appeared on national television to deliver a speech explaining his reasons for going to Congress as well as his continuing conviction that military action was necessary, that this menace must be confronted. Yet it was becoming clear that the authorization vote in Congress was still doomed. An unofficial head count by White House aides suggested that the nay votes could outnumber yes by as much as 4-1. If Obama lost, the political embarrassment would be but one dimension of a far reaching policy disaster. White House aides had been so convinced of congressional support for a military strike that they had barely considered what might happen if the lobbying effort failed. If Congress refused to go along with its Syria plan, the White House would be out of options. Assad would face no serious consequences for using poison gas to kill 1,400 of his citizens, and the rest of the world would witness the humbling of a US president who could manage to rally neither the United Nations nor his own Congress to do something about the slaughter. Other tyrants and strongmen from Iran to North Korea to Venezuela would certainly take note. As White House aides debated what to do, one possible alternative, a way to salvage at least a partial win, had failed to gain traction. During the initial debate over the outreach to Congress, Samantha Power, on a video conference screen from New York, wondered aloud about whether the threat of force might be leveraged to achieve the ultimate objective, eliminating Assad's arsenal of poisons. Why not try to secure the dismantlement of the chemical weapons stockpile program? Power asked. While she supported the airstrike, it was clear that with bombs alone, we're not going to do anything to fundamentally put a dent in his stockpile. The suggestion hung over the room for a brief moment, but then the discussion moved on. The idea that Assad might voluntarily surrender his most important strategic weapon seemed too far fetched to warrant serious debate, and Obama was still intent on pushing the authorization measure through Congress. People were so sure that we were going to get the congressional authorization, we didn't have a plan B, she said. As it became chillingly clear that we weren't going to get the authorization, we were naked. I mean, we were so naked. Dawn broke on Saturday, August 31, to find the Four Seasons Hotel and the rest of central Damascus still standing. But the evidence that had been carefully stashed in the inspectors' rooms had been cleaned out, every scrap of it. The UN team was gone as well. Ake Selstrom surprised his Syrian hosts by departing hours ahead of schedule. Instead of lining up outside the hotel at 8:30 that morning, the inspectors quietly loaded their gear into the Toyota Land Cruisers and took off for Lebanon in a sprint at 5 a.m., a full hour before sunrise. Secured inside the vehicles, there were six of them now, minus the one that had been shot up, were dozens of bags and boxes representing the entirety of their collection effort in Ghouta. Also in the SUVs, looking slightly dazed and sleep deprived, were two Syrian officials, Brigadier General Hassan al Sarif, the man of much eyebrow, as the inspectors jokingly dubbed him, and one of his deputies. They had been brought along to serve as Syrian guarantors against any tampering or mishandling of the evidence. It had also occurred to UN Security Chief Diarmuid O'Donovan that the presence of Syrian military officers in the convoy might lessen the chances of an ambush along the road to Lebanon. But given the team's experiences of the past week, it was a small comfort at best. O'Donovan judged that the early departure would give the team a good head start. If they were lucky, they might make it all the way to Lebanon before the Syrians could scramble their scattered assets to try to stop them. Sure enough, the vehicles, racing along on empty highways, covered the 40 miles to the border, crossing without mishap in record time. It wasn't over yet. Selstrom, sitting in the back seat of one of the SUVs, felt his shoulder muscles tense as the lights of the Syrian checkpoint came into view. The Toyotas queued up for passport inspection, and one by one each approached the guard station. Then, one by one, the SUVs were waved through. They were officially out of Syrian territory. It had been easy, almost too easy. Minutes later, the convoy began the ascent through the rocky gorges of no man's land. They drove along in silence through canyons still dim in the early light, and then at last the red tiled roofs of the Lebanese frontier town of Mashna came into view. Selstrom felt himself beginning to relax. We managed it, he thought to himself. We did our job, and nobody got hurt. Then he saw the faces of the Lebanese security officials who had come to meet the convoy. Something was wrong. There is a threat against you from Hezbollah, the chief security officer told Selstrom gravely. Lebanese intelligence had learned of a serious plot by the powerful Shiite militant group to target the UN convoy after it crossed into the country from Syria. The timing and the location of the planned attack were unclear, the official said, but the mission was in imminent danger. So this is how it's going to be, Selstrom thought. Assad allowed the UN team to slip out of Damascus with its trove of evidence, knowing that Hezbollah, a group closely allied with Syria as well as Iran, was poised to strike outside the country where his government could not be directly blamed. How would they accomplish it? An ambush somewhere along the highway? A bombing at the hotel, perhaps, or at the airport? The Lebanese security men were not in a mood to speculate. They rushed everyone back into their SUVs as a black armored escort vehicle took its place at the head of the column. Your presence is a threat to Lebanon, the security chief explained to Selstrom. We have to rush you to the airport. We cannot stop anywhere. Then they took off. The team later recalled the wild dash across Lebanon as the most harrowing journey of the entire expedition. The convoy raced along narrow mountain highways and careened through village streets with horns blaring. Special forces officers leaned out of the windows of the lead vehicle, waving guns and shouting at motorists to get out of the way. In Beirut's outskirts, they jagged in and out of traffic, forcing other cars onto the shoulder. They continued to roar along at the same breakneck pace up to the moment the convoy reached the Beirut Rafik Hariri International Airport and deposited its frazzled passengers at the door of a private departure lounge. Outside on the tarmac, just a few steps away, a chartered German jet stood waiting for them. There was a nervous pause as officials scrambled to obtain a Dutch visa for the two Syrians, but with all passports finally stamped, the UN team was hustled onto the plane for the flight to Holland. Only after the jet reached an altitude of 20,000 feet beyond the range of most soldier fired anti aircraft missiles did Selstrom and his deputies finally allow themselves to breathe.